Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Happy New Year, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 375 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is Monday morning, January 3rd, 2022. Duke hasn't played in over a week, like a week and a half, but they're
12 days. 12 days, Sam.
almost 2 weeks. Oh, my God. They are supposed to play tomorrow night, Tuesday night, at Cameron Indoor Stadium against Georgia Tech. And as of basically noon on Monday, that game is still on, so we are going to talk about that. I am your host for this episode. I am Sam Klein, coming to you from not snowy Boston. Donald Wine is here. He is in snowy Washington, D.C. this morning. Hi, Donald.
Hello, Sam. I am really excited because for the first time in like 2 years, we're getting some actual significant snow. Sam, as you know, D.C. likes to get a lot of threats of snow with not a lot of promise or a lot of actual precipitation, and this actually hit. I have about 4 inches on the ground here where I live. Parts of the city have gotten 6 to 7 inches. The federal government is closed for a good reason. It feels great. It feels great to look out and see finally winter, because funny thing is 2 days ago it was like 70 degrees here. Now it's snowing, and tonight we could get the lowest temperature DC has seen in 7 years. I'm as a native Midwesterner, this is my jam. This is what winter is. Let's have it.
Jason Evans is also here. Jason, are you jealous of what Donald is going through right now?
The weather is a crazy, crazy thing. And like Donald said, Atlanta has had the same kind of weirdness, not quite to the same extreme that Washington has. On Saturday, I went out and took a walk with my family and my mother. We were all in shorts and T-shirts. It was in the upper 70s, and like you're sweating on the walk. And today it's about overnight we had like gale force winds that brought down branches and knocked out power and stuff. And today it's close to freezing. You got to be worried about if you might hit an ice patch out there. How could this happen in 48 hours? It's insane.
It sounds a lot like where I used to live in Denver, and I did want to quickly, speaking of the weather.
Oh wow, they've had it bad in Denver.
Send good feelings and vibes to friends and acquaintances out in the Boulder area, because they got hit by that terrible fire a few days ago. I don't think we've spoken since that happened, but it was pretty devastating.
Sam, the pictures, as everybody knows, I work for CNN. The pictures I saw of like these families inside a Chuck E. Cheese as the fire started ripping through the parking lot.
Yeah.
That's some of the most terrifying stuff. I'm a parent. I can't even imagine how scary.
And it really was. It happened like in a neighborhood that, Jason, like looks like where you live. It happens in like in a suburb. It wasn't like in a very remote place like you would normally assume. Okay, enough about the weather. We do have Duke basketball to talk about. I'm not even going to do too much digression on the college football playoff because it wasn't that interesting. Sorry, Doug.
Go
Nothing
Dogs.
happened.
Go Dogs.
Nothing happened.
The underdog SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs trying to avoid losing 2 straight to Alabama next week. Anyway, we're not going to do too much on that. We are going to talk about Duke basketball. So as I said, Duke as of now is supposed to play Georgia Tech tomorrow night at home. It will be Duke's first game in almost 2 weeks. Before we get to the specific preview details on the Georgia Tech game, Coach K was part of the ACC coaches Monday press conference this morning. Jason was tuned in for a little bit of it, so we have a bit of a reaction to that. So Jason, why don't you give us the rundown on what Coach K shared this morning, because I think there were some interesting nuggets in there, particularly about the Duke team coming back from its little COVID shutdown and its availability to practice this week.
Yeah, the big news that Coach K revealed is that Duke expects to have players to play. In fact, Coach K says he thinks they're going to have the full roster for the Georgia Tech game. The key question, of course, is what will their conditioning be like? How much rust will Duke have? Because Coach K said COVID went through the entire team and through much of the coaching staff and much of the support staff. Look, we don't talk enough about those people, the folks behind the scenes who make things work for Duke basketball. COVID went through all of them. And Coach K said it has been really, really difficult. They have not practiced. They have not worked out very much at all over the past week. Now, he said, hopefully, depending on one more test, they're waiting for one more test to come back this morning. They probably already know. We don't know the results of it yet, but pending that one test, they think today, Monday, will be the first time they will have everyone back at practice since the Virginia Tech game on December 22nd. I want to repeat that. Like 12 days ago was the last time Duke had a full practice. It's kind of amazing. But Coach K said, like I said, that he expects the full squad to be available for Georgia Tech. And he freely admitted, he said they're not going to be in good shape. He said, conditioning has been a problem. It's been a challenge. And he also warned against the dangers of like binge conditioning, trying to, get guys into shape too quickly. This is something they're going to ramp up, kind of slowly and take their time. I expect you'll see Duke use a long bench against Georgia Tech. Try not to get anybody too winded. I wonder how much the cramping problem that we've seen for Trevor Keels and Paulo Banchero and Wendell Moore. Wonder if that's going to come back and be a problem for the team again. And then I did want to note that Coach K said even though COVID has run through everybody else, he has not gotten it. And that he is being super careful as anyone his age must be. He said that he and one other coach would be the only coaches at practice today, and that he's going to try and keep his distance from the players and from other folks as much as he can. And he's also really, really frustrated that there's not a universal testing protocol in place for the ACC. He wants more uniformity. He wants fairness, and he wants to know that the team that Duke is playing is clean before Duke takes the floor against them. He's said that for a while. He said that even before Duke ran into this COVID problem that we've had. Coach K has been very big about uniformity of coaching testing. But the big news, again, Duke will be back. Unless something crazy happens, we expect to bring a full squad, maybe missing one guy for the Georgia Tech game tomorrow, and hopefully they'll be practicing today.
Jason, when you look at the conditioning part of things, I'm glad you brought that up because it's very important. A lot of people think that because these kids are 18, 19, 20 years old, that they'll be able to bounce back quickly. And I think when it comes to the NBA, if you look at what the NBA has been doing over the last couple of weeks, when guys are going out due to COVID, you'll see when guys come back, they don't necessarily play all the time. Sometimes you see a nice little stat line that says DNP conditioning, because they know that being out for a few days, much less 10 or 5 or whatever, is a lot to a basketball player, because conditioning is very important. It's a huge part of the game. If you can't get up and down the floor for 40 minutes, you're not going to be able to play the game at a high level. And so guys are being held out as they ramp that conditioning back up, because they're going from practicing a couple times a day or whatever to nothing. And that takes a toll on the body, even as much as any other injury that you may have. So when it comes to this, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I do think that there will be a long bench tomorrow night should this game happen against Georgia Tech. I think there will be a long bench. You'll see guys, quick rotations. You won't see guys out there for 10-minute stretches. You'll see them out for 3-4 minute stretches. The TV timeouts are going to be super important. Maybe we see even Coach K use his timeouts a little bit more. Maybe he takes 2 in the first half instead of the usual 1 that he likes to take at the end of the first half because it can't carry over. Little things like that are going to affect this basketball game. Not necessarily in a negative, but it's things that people need to look out for. When you see, Paul Banchero or Wendell Moore have an extended break on the bench, It's not because of anything else. It could necessarily be because these guys just aren't physically ready to go 35, 40 minutes. And we need to make sure that we don't tire them out now. We have a long rest of the season ahead of us. And this is going to be something that over the course of the next week, we will have to do it. Reminder, this is basically, like you said, 12 days since the last game. Before that, we had a week where we had 4 games in 9 days. And before that, we had another 2-week break. So these guys have had some significant time off where guys aren't able to practice for whatever reason, whether it be exams or because of this COVID issue. So it's going to take a while for us to get into shape. And because of that, you're going to see a lot of rest.
This might be one of the weirdest games that Duke fans see this year, between the long pause related to COVID and the fact that the students are still not back. So the crowd in Cameron will be a little different. I haven't seen that Duke will necessarily be limiting attendance because of the spike in COVID cases, but they are limiting access to other things on campus. So this game may look more like last year, I think, than we would have liked any game this year to look.
Well, and Coach K talked a little bit about the crowds in Cameron, and he said very specifically he wants fans in attendance, but he wants them vaccinated. He doesn't want to even begin to consider going back to exactly what we had last year. He was adamant that he wants the Cameron experience to be there. But he also said, he goes, people come in there, they need to be vaccinated.
So that has been the policy this year. Everyone who, at least at this point, everyone who has had to enter Cameron has either needed to be vaccinated and show proof of vaccination. I know, Sam, you had to do this when you went down there. I had to do that when I went down there. But you also, if you weren't vaccinated, you had to show a negative test within the last, 72 hours. You had to show that before you even you had to get a wristband, basically, or an electronic notification that said you were cleared to enter Cameron. I think the issue that we're going to see with regards to the fan base is this. Students were supposed to be back on campus, or at least campus dorms opened this morning, but they are online and virtual until January 18th, which means they're actually actively telling students not to come back until then. When students come back, they then have to quarantine while they have a negative test, and every single student has to receive their booster before they return to campus, or receive their booster upon arrival on campus. So those are going to be slight changes from the student perspective. I wonder what that would mean over the next couple of weeks, because we do have a few home games, what that means for the upstairs bowl, so to speak. If they're going to be limiting capacity there, or if they're going to be instituting things that says, hey, everyone has to be vaccinated, or negative tests have to be within 24 hours as opposed to 72 hours, that will be something that I think people who like to or have tickets for the games over the next couple of weeks, myself included, that's what we should be keeping an eye on. But I do think that it won't be where there will be a full pause where fans will not be allowed. There will be fans. It's just a matter of what Duke does in the interim to try and make it so that they're not creating mixed messages by saying students don't come back, don't go to class, but Cameron, be as full as possible.
The other interesting thing here is, as you were saying, Donald, to consider sort of how the rotation may be different in this game relative to games already, and also hopefully the games in the future. So before we transition to talking about the Georgia Tech game specifically and the X's and O's of that, keep in mind the overall note here, which is that whatever we see from this Duke team tomorrow night, hoping that the game actually goes off, is probably not an indicator for what we're seeing in future games. It will be interesting to see kind of how some of these guys have recovered. But the other thing is that we don't know how COVID specifically affected any of the individual players on this Duke team. So we don't know, right? I don't know if Paulo actually tested positive, and if so, was he actually sick? Is he still recovering from that? It sounds like most of the players tested positive, but as we know right now, a lot of people are testing positive, showing no symptoms, and just having to wait it out. So we don't know if it has affected some guys more than it has others.
Yeah. And Sam, it's a great point about not knowing the degree to which guys were affected. We also don't know, depending on how sick players got, whether they were able to stay in shape at all. And like you guys say, we're playing a big guessing game. We will know Tuesday night and it's going to be really interesting to see. You may be surprised at the guys, at some guy who you didn't expect to play very much suddenly plays 20, 30 minutes, and guys who are mainstays, if they had to battle this for a few days, they may be limited to 15 minutes or so. It's I'm dying to see it. It's going to be very interesting.
If you're on home isolation because of COVID, you're probably not getting a ton of shots up,
or a lot of running.
Or a lot of run. You could do push-ups. You could do a lot of push-ups and pull-ups. And if you got a pull-up bar in your room, you could be continuing to do pull-ups.
Hey, if there's a silver lining to this, luckily for Jason, the walk-on stat category of the stats game is already over because we might see some points for some walk-ons tomorrow.
It might be a big, depending on if Duke is able to maintain the lead that they are supposed to have tomorrow night. This could be a big night for walk-ons, depending on who's still actually sick. Okay, we need to actually talk about the game and talk about Georgia Tech as we would always do. Before we do that, we are going to take a quick break. Sorry, this is coming maybe a little earlier than usual, but you'll notice that this episode is not probably as long as most of our prior episodes because there just isn't as much to talk about. So stick around. We'll be right back to preview Georgia Tech. So as we said, Duke is playing host to Georgia Tech on Tuesday night in Cameron. It is the Blue Devils' first game in almost 2 weeks, and the Yellow Jackets are the guest for this one. So we are going to break down Georgia Tech and their slew of wing guys, because it feels like Georgia Tech is a team comprised almost entirely of swingmen. I'm going to start by handing it off to Donald Wine. Donald, I'd like you to tell us just a bit about Georgia Tech and where they are at this point in the season. They are coming off a loss to Louisville over the weekend, so they have been sort of back from winter break in a way that the Blue Devils have not.
Yeah, and they, as you mentioned, they just got back from a extended pause themselves over the last couple of weeks with a loss to Louisville. They're 0-2 in the ACC, 6-6 overall. And really, when it comes to their wins, their best win is probably Georgia State, who was ranked 147th in KenPom, which is not great. But still, they're ranked 109th in KenPom. So they're not terrible, but they're not one of those teams that is going to be looked at as a quality win. So this is something where Duke really just has to forget the COVID part of things. In a normal world, Duke would want to come out and really take it to Georgia Tech early and not let up and make this where this is the game that ends early. They don't score very well. They score 68.8 points per game. They're like tied for 287th in the nation in terms of points per game as a team. They don't rebound super well. They don't pass the ball very well, but they do shoot the three fairly well. And they have a couple of guys that can shoot threes. Jordan Usher is one of their guys that can put the ball on the floor and go to the hole. You have Dalian Coleman, who is 55.6% from three, so he can shoot the three fairly well. And Michael DeVore, who leads the team in points per game with 21, he also can light it up from three. And they take a lot of threes. And I think Jason will talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the metrics. I think the one thing that we pointed out, there is one guy on this team that gets considerable minutes that's over 6'8", and his name is Rodney Howard. He is from my birthplace of Ypsilanti, Michigan. And he may not even play tomorrow because he was out due to injury against Louisville, which I believe was last night when they played. So I'm not sure again, take the COVID part out of it. And I know things will change from Duke's perspective, but this may have been a game already that we would have done small ball and we would have seen a lot more of it because they have a lot of wings. They have a lot of guards that play, but they don't have a lot of size. So one thing we do need to take advantage of is the boards. We haven't rebounded very well, but we're playing a team that really doesn't rebound very well. We have the size to do it. So hopefully Theo John, Mark Williams, Paulo Banchero, Wendell Moore can be guys that can clean up the glass and let us go out and transition quite quickly, because I think that's going to be the key. If we can limit them to one possession and get out and running, Georgia Tech is going to have a really, really bad night. And they're not a team that shoots very well. They shoot a lot for volume and they try to get points that way. But as I mentioned before, they don't like to score a lot of points. So that's it for Georgia Tech from my perspective. There's a couple of guys, like I said, that we need to look out for in DeVore, Usher, and Coleman. But Jason, I want to switch to you because I think advanced stats kind of tell the story a little bit better about Georgia Tech.
Yep. By the way, Donald, I hate to do this, but his name is Michael DeVoe, not DeVore.
Excuse me.
Yes.
He's only a senior, and he's only been here, the whole time, so it's fine.
Hey, last time we played him, it wasn't a factor. We were talking about other guys that were really good, but this guy is also very good. Has been lighting up this year.
Michael DeVoe is a heck of a player. He was the third best player in their team last year, and is far and away the best player in their team this year. But let's get into the advanced stats, like you say. As you indicated, Georgia Tech is 111th in KenPom. A year ago, they were 37th, so they are way down from the team that won the ACC last year.
Do you think they won the
Moses
ACC right?
Based on having a really, really great offensive team, mostly built around the distribution and efficiency of point guard Jose Alvarado, and then having Moses Wright just dominating inside, blocking shots, grabbing rebounds. Moses Wright was a force to be reckoned with last season. Both those guys are gone, and this is a whole new team. They are. I mentioned they were a really good offensive team last year. They were 22nd in the country in offense last year. That's really great. They're 143rd in offense this year. And it's kind of amazing that they're that bad at offensive efficiency when, as Donald mentioned, they're a good three-point shooting team. They hit 37.5% of their three-pointers. That's 33rd best in the country. The problem is they don't shoot many threes. Like, they only take them when they're wide open. In fact, their percentage of three-pointers attempted is 305th in the country. That's really low. This is a team that hits threes but does not like to take them. And they are basically below average in all their other offensive efficiency stats. They hit less than half their 2-point shots. They only hit 68% of their free throws, which is not that good. They don't get to the free throw line very much. They turn the ball over a lot. They have turnovers on almost 20% of their possessions. I mean, by comparison, Duke's one of the best teams in the country. We have turnovers on barely 13% of our possessions. That may not sound like a big difference, but 20 to 13% is a big deal in terms of turnovers. And as Donald mentioned, they're not a good offensive rebounding team. They're better on defense than they are on offense. They're decent at defensive rebounding, not great, but they're decent at it. They do a good job of defending the 3-point line. They know how to keep teams from scoring from out there, and they get some steals. They don't block many shots because they are very, very, very small. It's funny if you said to me, describe a team that is super experienced, has played a lot of college basketball together, but doesn't have a lot of really talented, superior kind of players. That would be Georgia Tech. Like, all their stats sort of bear that out, that this is a experienced team, knows what it takes to win at college basketball, but doesn't really have the horses to get it done, other than Michael DeVoe, who, as we said, he's averaging 21 points per game. Jordan Usher is the other sort of prominent guy on the team, who played a lot last year. He can score, he can rebound, but they have little else beside those two guys. And as Donald mentioned, they've got nothing on the interior. That Rodney Howard, who's the only thing who's even close to a post player, didn't play against Louisville. And even if he played, he's just not the quality center for the ACC. In fact, get this. I mean, this is kind of crazy to me, but Jordan Usher, who was a wing for them last year, and is really built as a wing. If you look at who they throw out there on the floor, Jordan Usher is quite often playing center for them. This guy he's just not a center, but he plays a lot of center for them. You're talking about a guy who's 6'7", 220, and he's not built like a center. His game doesn't fit a center. And the reason all that's significant for Duke is that, I think we're going to have an opportunity to dominate them on the inside, but it's going to be very interesting to see if we do that by going small or by going with Mark Williams and Theo John. I think there's probably a really good case for Duke allowing Paulo Banchero to be the biggest guy on the floor and letting him operate against Jordan Usher or Rodney Howard or one of these other guys for Georgia Tech, who really doesn't have a prayer of stopping Paulo Banchero when he gets into the post, and that him driving the ball into the post may be super efficient for Duke, depending on what kind of shape he's in, as we harken back to the question about Duke's conditioning.
Yeah, the size and rebounding quality difference between Duke and Georgia Tech, I think, allows for Duke potentially to, as you were saying, Jason, either go with a small lineup, the way that they did, sort of featuring AJ Griffin in the during some of those in between games, but also potentially to overwhelm and have dominating performances from the big guys, depending on exactly who's healthy and how the game plan is working. I wanted to just highlight, to come back, Michael DeVoe is a star this year for Georgia Tech. He's been a key contributor for them the last few years. And as I was saying at the top, Georgia Tech, and as Jason was talking about, Georgia Tech is really a team of guards and wings, and not so many big men. So DeVoe is 6'7" or 6'5", I think. And then a couple other guys, Jordan Usher, who you also mentioned, who plays a lot of center for them. He's just 6'7", but he's grabbing 7 rebounds a game. Has made a huge leap this year in his senior season. He and DeVoe are both seniors. Usher's made a huge leap this season. He's also shooting nearly 40% from three. As we said, they're not taking probably as many threes as they should. DeVoe and Usher are both good scorers when they're shooting the ball. It's just that the Georgia Tech offense is just not quite as crisp and efficient as I think Josh Pastner would like it to be. So Usher is a key part of the game plan for them. And then Khalid Moore is another 6'7" guy who also grabs rebounds, gets about 4 or 5 of those a game. Doesn't shoot quite as well as those other guys do, but is another player to look out for. So
he's yet another senior. All the guys
another senior.
All the guys you mentioned are seniors. DeVoe, Usher, Moore. Yeah, they're all seniors.
It's experience, and it's guys on the wing for Georgia Tech. But as we've noted, Duke is overwhelming here in talent, not necessarily in experience, but there's a reason that both ESPN and KenPom thinks that there's only a 5 or 6% chance that Georgia Tech knocks off Duke tomorrow night. I think if that does happen, it's probably a result of Duke having been sidelined for so long and having guys not able to practice together the way that they would have liked the last few days. When you were looking at this game a week ago, maybe Duke was going to be back in the swing of things by now. They've had now 2 ACC games get postponed, potentially canceled because of COVID. So now Duke is coming off a much longer holiday break, I think, than they would have anticipated.
Yeah, you mentioned KenPom and all the other metrics saying that Duke's probably going to win this game. It's worth noting that KenPom predicts that Duke will win the game 80-63. Not a very high scoring game. Georgia Tech is yet another. We're going to have this a lot in the ACC. One of these ACC teams that doesn't play with very fast pace. They want to slow Duke down as much as they can. The big key, and I mentioned this a little bit, but I just want to stress this again. Georgia Tech does a poor job of holding on to the ball. If they have a lot of turnovers, especially live ball turnovers, and Georgia Tech gives up a lot of steals. If Georgia Tech has a lot of steals to Duke, then Duke's going to get out and run with the ball. And that's a formula for Georgia Tech to be in real trouble, because if Duke is scoring 80 plus points, Tech does not have the offense to keep up. There's just no way.
Jason, that's a great point, because that also helps Duke in the form of, the COVID pause and the rust and the conditioning. If you play defense well enough where you don't really have to play offense as well, like you're only playing basically on one end of the court and you're just doing like quick transitions for easy buckets, that is going to let guys stay in the game longer because they're not exerting as much energy. And I know defense takes a lot of energy out of you, but if you're also not having to expend it on the offensive end because you're getting easy, quick buckets, we're going to rack up a lot of points and you're going to have guys out there longer, which will help with the rotations.
I think we've made it sound the last couple of weeks about the ACC like there are a bunch of ACC teams that are probably on the wrong side of the bubble now, but could give themselves NCAA tournament resumes. I do not think Georgia Tech is one of those teams. They're, as we said, they basically lost all of the potentially important resume building games in the non-conference part of their schedule, and the conference part of their schedule just does not have many opportunities for them. So, as we will repeat for basically every ACC opponent that Duke faces this season, this game for Georgia Tech is one of its only remaining opportunities to beat a surefire NCAA tournament team to build that resume. But they've got, everyone they played in the non-conference that is even potentially a bubble team, they lost to.
Yeah, and full credit to Georgia Tech. They played a tough schedule. I mean, they had a stretch in December, they played Wisconsin, North Carolina, LSU, and USC. That's 4 tournament teams right there. I mean, I think Wisconsin may be a little bit on the bubble. Big Ten, it's tough to say. They're probably in. But those are 4 really good teams. But they lost all those games. You know, some of them were Wisconsin was a little bit competitive, but, you know, they lost all those games, and they just have not beaten anyone who is even close to Duke's caliber. They haven't beaten anyone who's, you know, even the caliber of most of the teams in the ACC. At 6-6, it really feels like this is a year that Georgia Tech is on the bottom third of the ACC.
They did put together a nice stretch against LSU. They were up by like 15 against LSU in the first half, but then the lead just like completely evaporated on them. LSU is very good this year. Not sure how much our listeners are following the SEC, but LSU
the SEC is really good. Yeah, the SEC is really good.
The SEC is good, and LSU is a strong squad there. So I don't think there's any shame. There you go. I don't think there's any
Georgia
shame.
basketball is not good.
I don't think there's any shame in losing to LSU, but and props to them for at least making it a fun game for the first 25 or so minutes. But guys, I think that is it on Georgia Tech. We will, of course, be back to review that game, or hopefully, fingers crossed again, that we don't have to talk about Duke having more games canceled. We wanted to thank you all again for the mailbag submissions. We got a few more after we posted the episode. So appreciate those.
Sam, there are people out there who heard us answer the mailbag stuff and go, "Oh wait, I've got a question now."
Look, we'll do it. Look, I mean, we'll probably have to do it again sooner than later, unfortunately. But of course, there's always the off season, and I think we've got a few buried down there that we need to address in the off season that don't have to come right now. So I'm sure that'll come back up. Of course, stay in touch. If you do have questions for us, we may be able to answer them sooner than later. dbrpodcast@gmail.com. That's where you can always find us. I think we've been good about responding to all of them, even if we're not talking about them explicitly on the show. So they've been a lot of fun. For Jason Evans and for Donald Wine, I am Sam Klein. This has been episode 375 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Do whatever stupid, superstitious thing you need to do to make sure that the Duke Georgia Tech game actually happens tomorrow night. And we will talk to you after it is over. Have fun, stay safe, enjoy yourselves, go Duke, and we will talk to you again soon. Duke Band, take us home.